Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something deeply unsettling. We're looking at the dark side of human psychology to explore a chilling reality, just how easily ordinary, everyday people can be completely transformed by their environments. We're going to break down the complex dynamics of who we are versus where we are, drawing on some major behavioral research and, of course, the infamous Stanford prison experiment.
But before we get into the heavy evidence, I want you to ask yourself a really honest question. Is there literally any scenario where you could be pushed to do the unthinkable? We all like to think we know ourselves so well. We pay our taxes, we go to work, we follow the rules, right? But the catch is, we only know ourselves based on our limited experiences in familiar situations. What actually happens when the ground rules completely change?
Just take a look at this visual illusion by M.C. Escher. It's called Circle Limit 4. If you look closely, you'll see the world here is packed tight with both good and evil. And the barrier between the white angels and the black devils, it is terrifyingly permeable. They literally fit perfectly into one another, like a giant puzzle. It kind of forces us to confront this profound psychological truth. That divide between us and them, the righteous and the wicked, is way less rigid than we'd like to admit.
So, let's shatter a few comforting myths we tell ourselves about who actually commits terrible acts, starting with the illusion of evil itself.
You see, society loves binary logic. We love sorting the good apples into one basket and the bad apples into another. But we really need to redefine evil. It's not some supernatural force. It's an action. It's the psychological state of, knowing better but doing worse. It's an incrementalist view. That means evil isn't just genetic inheritance or some fixed trait you're born with. It's something every single one of us is capable of, depending entirely on the circumstances. Now, most of us hide behind what psychologists call an egocentric bias. Basically, we falsely believe we're uniquely invulnerable, that there's this unbridgeable chasm separating us from the quote-unquote bad seeds. But this bias, it's just a protective shield. By viewing evil as an inherent entity, something you're just born with, we conveniently let good people off the hook. It completely blinds us to our own role in creating or even just ignoring the conditions that allow bad things to happen.
Which brings us to a really crucial point. When our inner moral compass slips into neutral, what actually dictates how we go wrong?
When trying to understand atrocities, society almost always leans on the dispositional view. We blame a few bad apples, totally ignoring the situational view, the environment, or what we call the bad barrel itself. Think of it like this. The dispositional approach is a medical model trying to cure the individual. But the situational approach, that's a public health model looking at the toxic environment that created the disease in the first place. It's the systemic power structures, the barrel makers, that arrange the exact conditions to corrupt the people inside.
And to see just how extreme this situational evil can get, we can look at the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Systematic political restructuring literally turned ordinary farmers and lifelong friends into remorseless murderers. The ruling Hutus were manipulated by extreme systemic propaganda and arbitrary status differentials to slaughter the Tutsi minority. Even former social workers orchestrated unspeakable acts. It absolutely proves that when the situational pressure is high enough, anyone, and I mean anyone, can be transformed by a hostile environment.
So, how does this actually work? Let's look at how this builds into an actionable weapon through the terrifying power of dehumanization. There's this concept called the hostile imagination, which is basically the psychological construction that transforms others into a worthless enemy. And psychologist Albert Bandura proved exactly how easily we can disengage our morality to do this in a lab setting. He had student volunteers help another group learn by punishing their errors with escalating electric shocks. The experimenters wanted to isolate, in real time, exactly how dehumanization works.
And the results brilliantly illustrate the horrific power of a single word. Look at how the shock levels shift on this graph, based entirely on a label. If the victims were called nice guys, the shock stayed low. No label, moderate shocks. But the absolute second they were dehumanized as animals, which you can see in that massive spike right there on the chart, the participants aggressively dialed up the pain. Their moral standards just completely disengaged. All right, now that we've established the power of the bad barrel, let's see what happens when we construct one from scratch, right in the middle of idyllic Palo Alto, California.
On a Sunday morning, August 14, 1971, the illusion of systemic power was made violently real. Actual Palo Alto police officers, we're talking squad cars, sirens, TV cameras, the whole shebang, raided homes to arrest college students for a psychology experiment. Using the very real authority of the badge, they stripped away these students' freedom without any warning whatsoever.
You have to notice the meticulous, theatrical steps of these degradation rituals. By involving real cops who went strictly by the book, spreading them eagles, searching them, reading Miranda rights in public, and throwing them into a squad car in front of stunned neighbors, both the police and the kids were instantly trapped in their new roles. It was an absolute masterclass in establishing environmental dominance.
And here is the truly wild part. These students were just volunteers. They answered a newspaper ad to earn $15 a day for a 2-week study on prison life. They'd all undergone psychological testing to make sure they were healthy, normal, middle-class youth with zero criminal record. They were literally just doing this for a bit of summer cash, completely unaware of the psychological crucible they were about to walk into.
It is absolutely crucial you remember this. There was zero psychological difference between these groups. Their terrifying transformations were based entirely on the random flip of a coin. The researchers didn't pick the tough guys to be guards and the submissive guys to be prisoners. At the start, they were completely interchangeable. It was the situation, the specific role they were assigned, that dictated their entire new reality.
The sheer weight of this systemic illusion was immediate. Take hubby Whitlow, for example. As he was being handcuffed, his neighbor actually gasped out loud, "What is this world coming to? Now it's the Whitlow boy who's committed a crime?" That public shame made hubby feel the actual, heavy guilt of a criminal. Even though he knew it was just an experiment, the ambient environment, the sirens, the flashing lights, a real cop shutting down his jokes, it completely overpowered his rational mind.
Meanwhile, you had anti-establishment students like Doug Carlson sitting defiantly in the squad car. He was naively relying on that egocentric bias we talked about earlier. He fully believed he was immune to the fabricated reality of a mock jail. He saw himself as this tough, independent thinker, assuming the whole thing was kind of ridiculous and he'd just walk away if it got too tough. Man, did he underestimate the power of the situation.
So as these boys are blindfolded and led down into the darkness of a basement prison, I want to leave you with this final thought. If the line between good and evil is truly this permeable, what would a toxic system turn you into? Stripped of your name, blindfolded, and locked inside a bad barrel demanding your total compliance, are you absolutely certain you'd remain the person you think you are today? Thanks for exploring the evidence with me here on The Explainer.